We're missing one, but she shall be here momentarily, so we'll get started and call to order. Start out with a pledge of allegiance, please. Moving into open forum, in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, members of the commission shall not discuss, deliberate, or make any decisions on topics not posted as an agenda item. Speakers who come up and speak tonight, if you would, address all remarks to the commission and limit your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. When you come up, please state your name and address, please, for the record. It's a requirement for us. Moving on to 4A, consider approval of the minutes from Planning and Zoning Commission meeting held on November the 10th, 2025. And we'll entertain a motion when ready.
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
And I second those.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. Okay. Moving on to 5A, regular agenda. Public hearing, discuss and consider action on zoning case ZON 2025-14 regarding a zone change from B2 general business to R2 single family on one parcel of land approximately 1.79 acres plus or minus in size, more particularly described by the Nacogdoches Central Appraisal District parcel 33096 and generally located on the southeast corner of Old Tyler Road and Jeffrey Street, Nacogdoches, Texas. Mr. City Planner.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Juan Paulette, City Planner. So this property fronts Old Tyler Roads and Jeffrey Street and is approximately 1.79 acres and is undeveloped. The surrounding properties to the south are primarily undeveloped with single-family residential development to the west and northeast. The applicant plans to construct a single-family home on the property. The subject property is surrounded by a mix of commercial and residential zoning districts. The adjacent properties along Old Tyler Road are Zone B2 General Business with residentially zoned properties to the east and west. The future land use plan designates the subject property as the future land use plan designates the subject property as single-family residential. Staff believes that the future land use designation of the property is consistent with the proposed zoning and aligns the existing residential development pattern in the area. And this is the picture of the subject property from Old Tyler Road. And a picture of a single-family home directly across the street. This slide shows the land uses within a 200-foot notification area. Staff sent out 13 public meeting notices to those property owners and 4 notice postcards to property owners within 200 and 500 feet. Staff has not received any letters in opposition or in favor of this request. And there was no neighborhood meeting held for this item. Typically, we only hold the neighborhood meetings if the zoning request is for a more intense use. Staff believes that this request meets the conditions of approval as stated in the staff report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And we will open it up to public comment if anyone would like to speak on it. Okay, we will close it for public comment and open it up for commission discussion if there's any questions. A motion when ready.
I make a motion to approve the zone change from B2 to R2.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. Okay. did 5A.
Great.
Moving to 5B, discuss and consider action on a specific use permit case SUP 2025-07 regarding a specific use permit request by Liquor by the Drink in a B2 General Business District on one parcel of land approximately .38 acres plus or minus in size, more particularly described by the Nacogdoches Central Appraisal District parcel 23487 and located at 1426 Douglas Road, Nacogdoches, Texas. Mr. City Planner.
Thank you, Chair. Juan Paulette, City Planner. So the subject property is located on the north side of Douglas Road, which is a commercial corridor with a mix of commercial and residential uses. The property contains an existing single-family residence fronting Douglas Road and a newly constructed restaurant located towards the rear of the site. The restaurant recently opened at this location in August of last year after relocating from the adjacent property to the east. The request is for a SUP for Liquor by the Drink for an existing restaurant, which is required due to the proximity of residential zoning. The subject property is Zone B2 General Business, which allows for a restaurant by right. The properties along Douglas Road are primarily B2, with residential zoning located immediately to the north of the subject property. Because of the subject property is within 300 feet of a residentially zoned property, the ordinance states that the specific use permit is required for Liquor by the Drink service. Although the adjacent parcel to the north is zoned residential, it has historically been used for non-residential purposes, including a commercial salvage yard. The future land use plan designates the subject property as single-family residential. Although the future land use designation does not align with the current zoning, the property is zoned B2 General Business and is located along an established commercial corridor. And here's a picture of the subject property. You can see the single-family residential home in front with the restaurant in back. This slide shows the land uses within the 200-foot notification area. Staff sent out 13 notices to those property owners within 200 feet and 15 notice postcards to those within 200 and 500 feet. And no responses have been received in favor or in opposition of the request. A neighborhood meeting was held at the City Council chambers and no residents attended. Staff believes that this request does meet the conditions for approval as stated in the staff report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after the public hearing.
Close for public comment, open up for any questions.
I have a quick question. You send these notices out, Juan, in Spanish as well? Or is it all English?
It's in English.
Okay. Okay, that was my question. Thank you. I make a motion, well, let's comment on that first. This has residentially been used as a single-family residence area within the corridor, correct?
This particular property has a single-family home that's grandfathered.
Grandfathered in,
yes.
but typically all of these along that long corridor are businesses.
Correct. They're all zoned B2, and it's just a mix of residential and commercial uses.
Right,
But
okay,
it's all zoned
perfect.
commercial.
Thank you. I make a motion to approve.
Second. I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. Okay. Moving on to 5C. Consider approval of an ordinance for the city of Chapter 118 zoning, Article 1 in general, Section 118-1 definitions, Article 3 district regulations, Section 118. Regulations adding Section 118 Code of Ordinances of the City of Nacogdoches. is providing a severability clause, providing a continuation clause, and providing an effective date. Mr. Mike New.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioners, Mike New, Executive Director of Development and Infrastructure for the city. Basically, I wanted to cover all the elements here. There's a mouthful on the ordinance amendment, but we're creating and identifying a new land use within our land use schedule. So I kind of want to start from the beginning. One of the things I covered in the summary is that basically the whole state has seen an increase in energy supply from alternative energy sources, wind, solar, and others. But along with that, as a supplementary use, you've got battery storage. That's a big component of how that energy is distributed and maintained at very strategic times within our state's energy grid. So more than 12 gigawatts of storage, and please don't call me on megawatt, gigawatt, and anything that has an electrical professional basis. I'll do my best from a land use perspective, but I'm not an expert on a lot of the industry regulations. However, as far as uses go, we're seeing an increase, bottom line. And for Texas cities, it's not that common identifying regulations currently that are specific to these battery energy storage systems or energy storage systems in general. What we're attempting to do is, and what we have done over the last few months, is kind of evaluate what the potential impacts are on our community, but on communities in general. And then I'll show you some examples of other communities and kind of how we looked at it holistically within our comprehensive plan and our future land use plan. One of the impacts that came to the forefront, and we do have a member of our fire department here if there's any questions, there's a unique safety profile for the battery energy storage in particular. If it's lithium-ion based, there's risks like thermal runaway and different fire behaviors and toxic emissions that are components of that. There's a number of media highlighted stories, not to say that this is a common factor, but it is a factor in this particular land use. And what that does is create a unique uncertainty if cities aren't defining that accordingly. So why are we considering an ordinance? We've had inquiries just in the little over a year that I've been here, and certainly within the last few months about potential solar farm development and accompanying battery storage or some type of storage technology to accompany that to support grid resiliency. You may have seen newspaper articles going all the way back a year and a half about some of the larger land areas outside of our city, but there are components that could be necessary for those to function within our city limits that are in proximity to on-core substations. And there's 5 existing substations within the city limits, one directly on campus and others sort of around our Stallings Loop perimeter. Technology types that could be incorporated within our definition but aren't limited to that. Battery energy storage would probably be the one that was a particular focus initially, but thermal energy storage, and there's other types as well. And I'll get to some of that criteria based on our definition. Our land use comparison, one things that we thought about in developing the definitions in the category is, for an example, solar farms need a significant amount of land and acreage to support the type of power that's needed to really have an impact on the grid and provide that resiliency. Maybe not something that's a factor within city limits, but components of that could be incorporated with land that's outside of our city limits, for instance. And battery storage systems need much less land than your typical solar farm panel acreage sites. That allows
So
for.
when you say significant, like what's significant?
Well, like I mentioned, one of the providers in the past that was looking in our area had mentioned 3,000 acres for a typical solar farm utility scale project. And it's one of the reasons why we've identified ESS industrial, large scale, and we'll touch on why we've done that. What are some other considerations that we as staff have made? We can't just say if it's not listed in our land use schedule, then we're not going to permit it. The courts have largely held that to be no longer valid. So we do need to find ways to identify land uses that are otherwise permissible and not prohibited by law within our code. There's still a lot of other uses that we can find maybe applicable to certain definitions, or that we can, as a planning staff, lean on with definitions that we have. But if you've been following us in the last year, certainly this commission has followed a number of definition changes and land uses that we've applied based on what we're seeing in the field. And this is certainly an element of interest in industry that we're seeing that really needs to have a very clear definition within our land use schedule. So current options that we apply without very explicit definitions in our land use chart, our planning staff tries to identify ways and similarities of particular uses. We've come across this maybe a couple of times when we came to this commission and the council with changes to tattoo parlor versus beauty salon. That would be one example where we kind of had a gray area, and if we step in one direction, we find very different regulations versus another direction. Why we're taking the approach of providing a specific definition for ESSI, the large-scale ESS certainly has implications from a safety profile, like I mentioned a minute ago, but also in proximity to residential properties, and certainly there's mixes of that if this were allowed across the board and weren't designated under a specific industrial district. And we'll explain that as well with our comprehensive plan. So what does the comp plan say? In general, neighboring land uses should not detract from the enjoyment of value of properties. That could have implications with industrial next to residential. And then any negative land use impacts, noise, odor, pollution, excessive light, those are things called out in the comprehensive plan but are not restricted to that, should be considered and minimized. Particularly related to industrial development, which is how we've classified this land use, good access to the routes. The ones in red that you see on your screen are ones that probably most applicable to this. Be targeted in industrial development areas, separated from other uses by buffers and not directly adjacent to residential. Again, those are our kind of criteria we're using as a basis for how we've applied this particular land use. What does the future land use plan say? If you look at our current, I'm going to put that in quotes, current future land use plan, and this commission has mentioned many times and staff is working on significant updates to that plan. The industrial, which you see in purple here, those are our designated areas under our future land use map. The other areas are highlighted, but you can see a very significant amount of rural and single family in many other areas of the city, even some along our corridors extending out into the county. So that was something that we were sensitive to in kind of developing this definition and trying to find the right zoning district for this particular use. What did our zoning ordinance subcommittee say? ESS regulations and discussion and background materials were discussed in May, August, and October of 2025. In our fire department, we do have a representative from our fire marshal's office here, like I said, who can speak to the safety profile of battery energy storage systems in particular, and the implications for emergency responders. How do we look at it from a city response perspective, not just a land use perspective, and what are the potential risks there? And if you have questions on that now, happy to entertain that with our fire department.
Open it up for,
Oh, let me continue then. I'll finish with my presentation and we'll come back to that if we're needed. Subcommittee members did ask that we make a distinction here, and this was the industrial hyphen that you see at the end of that acronym, to separate it from residential scale ESS. We've also done that with the megawatt hour because residential scale is typically kilowatt hour or less. Things like EV chargers, rooftop panels on single family homes, those would be excluded from this type of definition. So we're not scooping more than we need to and identifying what the potential risks are. What do other cities say? There were several examples that provided for BESS in particular, because this is the prevailing energy storage system right now. Could be others in the future. Baytown, Bryan, League City, Texas City, those all had examples, some more restrictive than others, some providing for what we're providing in our definition, industrial, heavy industrial zoning category. I think League City allows it in, let me look. Oh, no industrial, Baytown, I'm sorry. No industrial classification there, but specific use process. So we're kind of in line with some of what the current cities that provide for BESS in particular provide for, but energy storage system, that definition does comport with National Fire Code. It was a resource that we used because we'd gone through this process of updating our building codes just over this last summer. So we wanted to be consistent there. What does the industry say? We have heard from one in particular. They reached out to us today. They're aware of today's meeting and our presentation to council next week. ESA Solar, they've engaged some folks in the community, and they've inquired with our staff about best land uses in the city in Nacogdoches. Specifically, there's no application, so this isn't a consideration for that, but they've wanted to present to us that they're interested in a 10 megawatt capacity best facility. They prefer citing SUP in any zoning district, and that they're supportive of other supplementary regulations. So I felt like I should share that with you. We did tell them they've missed the window for formal public comment, but they certainly can provide that comment and this information to the council in their own voice. They have time to do that for the next meeting. So what are we proposing? Definition specifically, energy storage system industrial means one or more devices assembled together capable of storing energy at an industrial grade power rating of 1 megawatt hour or more in order to discharge later when the power electricity is needed to ensure adequate grid capacity and resiliency. Almost word for word, this matches what the National Fire Code says, minus the 1 megawatt hour. That was a level that in discussion with fire and in review of some of our materials, we felt was needed to really appropriately place this in an industrial category. Again, we're removing some of the residential, smaller scale energy storage systems or storage systems that may support an individual site as backup power or peak power shaving. This is strictly grid capacity and resiliency support. Our land use schedule. Here's what it would look like within our schedule. Again, I've truncated it to highlight this particular row, but ESSI would be a specific use permit under heavy industrial, I2, with special guidelines identified by that asterisk, and we'll cover the special guidelines here. Lot size, minimum of 1 acre. Setbacks, minimum of 50 feet. Perimeter fencing required, landscaping and screening required, separation from other ESSI located properties, and if it's within, limited to more than 1,000 feet from residential zoning districts. Very restrictive. Decommissioning plan, we do ask that if someone were to apply, if this were in place, that they provide a decommissioning plan to follow all state regulations. And one of the things I included in my summary was that the legislature just this year, in this legislative session, passed HB 3809, provides a little bit more detail on what those commissioning plans look like. So there are state regulations, regardless of what we do locally, that any company that's providing these type of systems would have to adhere to. And our decommissioning plan, as proposed, does not conflict with some of those requirements. In fact, calls out that they have to be in accordance with state law. And I'll answer any questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, sir. We'll open it up to public comment if there's anyone who'd like to speak on it.
ESA is.
If you'll come up and state your name and your address, please. Thank you.
My name is Martin Baker. I'm the director of Godtail Ministries, and ESA is
Your address, I'm sorry. It should make us say this.
1607, I think, Douglas Road's where Godtail is.
Perfect. Thank you.
And anyway, they've been talking to us for a couple of years now about this. They've actually leased a couple of acres of land from us, and with the possibility of having a battery energy storage system on that property out there on Douglas Highway where we are. And so, anyway, anything that we can do to expedite this, we'd be glad to work with y'all. All right.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else that would like to speak remotely? I don't even know if we have anybody remotely. Are we that lucky? No? Nobody wants to join? Okay, we'll close it to public comment. Open it up for commission discussion and questions.
You know, I have questions.
Yes, of course.
So you've addressed a lot of the decommissioning, and do you think like the setback requirements, sorry, I'm going back, let's start from one. Lot size of 1 acre, setbacks of 50 feet at minimum against all areas, is that correct? Buffer zone of 50 feet. Is that enough if you are going to be doing a special use permit within the city area?
It would depend on the area. And of course, each city had different distances from what those setbacks were.
What was the average, do you know?
It's between 50 and 200. I mean, some were as high as 300. 50 may seem minimum, but if our goal and where we were a little bit more restrictive was separation from residential. So that distance, we were a bit more, I would say, restrictive than we would be with the setbacks. If it otherwise is not near residential, we're probably more generous on the setbacks at 50 feet than we would be.
On that one, Mike, I mean, since this is you would need an SUP associated with the zone change if it's not there. Can you add more to that distance if need be?
Any of those distances could change based on input from the commission and council, certainly.
At the time of application for that, or would we be
With
limited?
discretion, I'm assuming that would be a minimum. I'm sure, because we've talked about in other SUP cases, speaking of hours of operation, we couldn't be less restrictive, but I'm sure we could be more restrictive if that applied in a particular instance.
Decommissioning is wonderful to include in it, and I'm glad that you guys have, because clearly we, my concern was a lot of the lithium-ion battery storages leaks, recycling facilities around, where's the closest one, where would they be taking it, how would we actually enforce it should this, let's think about wells, and they don't get plugged, and they stay on land for decades without actual proper structure of the company that is opening this endeavor up to, close all accounts by means, the enforceability of it in your research, it's relatively new for energy storage. So what have you found in terms of issues that may occur from this?
I do think the state, and I provided a link within the summary to the state legislation. Again, I'd have to go back and look. I think there are financial implications about
Right, there will be fines.
ensuring, well, fines, yes, but maybe even capture at the time of licensure or meeting those state guidelines. Can't speak to that from a local perspective, but as far as the decommissioning plan, it would have to address all applicable state laws if that were a component.
Right, and our state laws are very generous right now for energy storage. And I'm looking out for our residents here in
Yeah.
Nacogdoches and our city, and I just want to make sure that what we're doing and what we're voting on for this ordinance language is going to be appropriate. The other thing is my concern about environmental concern. What are the enforcements on that one, or for the application? What do they have to get required in order for them to meet EPA standards, or TCEQ? What are we looking for in that?
As far as the permitting? Well, I don't have anything specific within what we're proposing speaking to state requirements as far as obtaining the permit. I would probably compare that to, we spoke about tattoos, we've spoken about, we've just had one liquor by the drink. There are state licensure requirements for those other uses that aren't specifically addressed as a condition of us permitting. But it could be something that we insert as part of a requirement where we review that or inspect that.
I would absolutely love to have that as a requirement. And sorry if I'm hogging the mic. The other question that I have for you is, in terms of our future land use plan, and within the city limits, it's kind of, you talk about the energy storage being a lot less, more, you'd have to have over 1,000 acres to collect the energy, but storage is going to take a lot less. So when we're looking at industrial zones, is that where we're particularly looking at to put this type of density of this use?
Well, if, there may be components where elements of a project are outside the city. Let's use solar farms. That's the present one. If there were a large solar farm outside the city and it was connected via transmission line, utility lines, transmission lines are permitted in any district, and that connection can be made from outside the city to support a storage system inside the city. But considering the conditions of this particular use, I don't know that we've looked for anything more flexible than heavy industrial just because of the implications of it.
Right, okay, thank you.
So then how does that overlay with, if we're sticking to the heavy industrial, with the Encore substations? Right, because if I'm understanding it correctly, the system will need to be connected to whatever dispenses that power.
It would be, and I did speak with our Encore representative about this. They don't police storage systems. I mean, their storage systems are a client just like anyone else and have the ability to connect, and Encore is obliged to connect them in a way that meets their regulatory requirements. But we weren't doing this with intent to identify the substations that exist today or any future substations as a metric of it. But I will tell you that there's probably more interest in locating some of these in proximity to substations. And currently, we have one in an R2 under SUP. We've got one right in the middle of SFA campus. We've got one off Douglas Road. So they're in various zoning districts already, and Encore manages those substations. I don't know that there would be another entity outside of Encore that would do that at this point. So the third party that would need to connect to our grid within our area would work through Encore to do that. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to be close to a substation, though. It would just be far more expensive if they were further away.
Sure.
I'm sorry, on this subject, just out of curiosity, I mean, you would have spot zoning of industrial to accommodate the storage facility in most scenarios because of the substations.
Right, that would create a very difficult issue to establish industrial zoning. Now, that doesn't mean that it cannot happen, and we evaluate the land uses that exist for that. For instance, if you look at this future land use map along the South Loop, the land uses within that area to the right of the edge of that purple along the South Loop, then those are existing industrial areas. If you look just to the right of that, you see sort of a little red outline that's kind of representing our wastewater plant. There's a substation right in that area. So you would look at proximity to that, and we'd have to identify whether that meets criteria if they do request. If this were in place and they did request specific use, what does that look like in relation to districts that exist already around those areas? And that's really the key, is what's around it. We've just looked at residential within a predominantly B2 district, but it does meet future land use criteria. It does meet what we're interested in seeing within our comp plan. So in that instance, it wouldn't necessarily be spot because we'd be applying our broader criteria to that.
Unique for sure.
It is unique.
I have another question in terms of fire suppression because of lithium ion. And I know that you are here to speak on
Still my
that.
question. Go ahead.
Oh. You know, what are the requirements for this type of station to be put into place for this ordinance, you know, in terms of what they need to actually supply and fire suppression?
Emergency response capability.
Correct. Emergency response capability, proximity, whatever else is going to be addressed. And
I will pass this one on.
yeah,
And more broad.
Nacogdoches has been known to burn quickly in the past, so let's not make that happen again.
Committee members, Jody Chandler, Nacogdoches Fire Marshal for the city. So one more time, just brief what your question.
Basically, fire suppression, what it would take to actually, you know, handle an emergency.
Handle one of these fires?
Correct.
So whenever you start talking about energy systems, it's evolving, we're learning. We've actually had TEECs come in and give us a class on not only the electric vehicles with fires, but they also introduced us into the battery energy storage systems. So whenever you have lithium-ion batteries, our number one deal that we're worried about is thermal runaway. Mm-hmm. That's where one cell goes crazy inside there, and with them being stacked right beside one another, it's just a chain reaction. Most of those batteries are sealed, so from a firefighting aspect, an energy storage system is not like us going and putting out a house fire and then just 2 hours and we're done and we leave the scene. The complications that come with energy storage systems are that, yes, we may show up and get water on the fire quickly, get it knocked down. The problem is that these can reignite, catch back on fire hours later. Some have been known to even catch on fire days later. So they're very, very hard to put out. They're almost impossible to extinguish. It would take continuous monitoring, like their departments, and I just kind of revert to vehicle fires where they have actually had to sit on a vehicle fire from an electric vehicle for like 8 hours. So we don't have the manpower and the capability to just be like, yeah, you're going to go sit at this
Right.
energy storage facility for a week and make sure it doesn't catch back on fire. Some of them do require them to have, you can require them to have a sprinkler system on the facility. But like I said, they're so hard to put out, like it's going to be running constantly. You pretty much just have to let it burn out completely. Let it run its course.
What about explosions?
Can be some explosions. Not sure what the rate of that is, like how many have been known to explode. The big deal is the toxic gases that the lithium ion puts off. Hydrogen fluoride is a number one. It's one of the top two, and then hydrogen cyanide. A lot of those are. Hydrogen fluoride is a really bad skin irritant, can damage the tissue all the way down to the bone. Hydrogen cyanide is more of a inhalant problem. Also, with the study that we had from TEEX, the class that we had from TEEX, they did a study with lithium ion, and now with lithium ion fires, they are finding that firefighters, that when you go in, of course, we got to get close to the fire, you're going to get some smoke on you, you're going to be in the smoke. Well, that smoke is containing heavy metal particles that will now be embedded in your bunker gear. So once they figured that out, they had done their laboratory test. They had the bunker gear come back. It showed the metal particulates. Now they're trying to figure out the best way to clean it to get every bit of it out. And they haven't found a way yet. So you're not just going to wash your gear one time like we would at a house fire and get it pretty much almost spotless clean, because it's still showing metal contaminants inside the gear. So those are a bunch of the concerns. Water runoff. We're not just going to go use 1,000 gallons of water and put it out. You're talking about thousands and thousands of gallons, just depending on how big the fire is, how big the energy storage system is. They can be small, like the small shipping containers, and then you have some when they get into the large commercial value. They will be a 40-foot container, and there are some sites that have 10 or 12 of those on there, and they're just nothing but, they're full of batteries. So I mean, there's a lot that we have to take into consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was very informative.
Jody, I have a question, just
Okay.
real quick. Do we have the policies, does the fire department have the policies or procedures to handle these batteries? And do we have the equipment to handle them?
Equipment, yes. I mean, it'd be fighting it a little bit different than a house fire, but I mean, it's number one, when you get there, it's nothing like a house. We can go pull a meter, and then we're not worried about the electricity. Like, even though you go through the disconnect procedures, I've been reading, like, a lot of people, they have to have very broad, like, very well detailed emergency shutdown procedures for when firefighters go into that, because you can't just roll up on the fire truck, see that Connex box full of batteries is on fire, and start shooting at water, because we all know water and electricity does not mix.
Right.
So yes, we have the equipment to, once it's safe and we can start putting water on it. Yes, we could do it. Now, the time management wise, as far as just like if you got to have 2 or 3 apparatus stay there for hours, days upon, that would be our issue.
I think, look, I mean, Texas is growing, 20 million people are projected to move to Texas by 2050.
Yeah.
So energy is probably one of the biggest problems in the state, one of the biggest problems in the state anyway. So these battery storage facilities absolutely are going to become more prolific in our communities.
They are.
So, maybe, Mike, it's a combination of the fire department obviously is the first responder and stabilizes, and this is not for this, but just for, the future. The fire department gets there and stabilizes it, but the applicant has a responsibility to have professionals respond within 24 hours to take over, securing the scene. I don't know. It just seems reasonable.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Mike, I thank you and staff for bringing it forward, because we've said, this is going to be a more growing and prevalent thing, and as much as I wish we could say, well, it's not in our codes, so you can't do it. Apparently, we can't do that anymore. Oh man! So I appreciate that. I'll be honest with you, from my perspective, I get that we have to have something, so I think that's awesome, but I think we could be more restrictive. And Jerry, I don't know if you can legally put this in. I always ask those questions because, why not? But is there a way for us to put in there, in addition to lot size, additional setback requirements, things like that, distance from surface water?
And we're just talking here.
Yeah.
Is what I personally don't want to do is restrict the city from being able to work with an applicant coming in, but can the city, outside of the rule here, if you will, that'll go to city council, can the city develop a criteria of what needs to happen that can be supported by this document? So in other words, nothing we have to really vote on, but does the city create parameters that, i.e., D is saying, but also, setbacks. You may have 50-foot may not be good in a certain location because of residential housing and the safety of that. So you may be more restrictive. It's an SUP, so you can really get more restrictive if you need to be.
Well, I will say, and I appreciate Jody for coming up here and explaining some of the response mechanisms. We went through a process, very lengthy process of updating our building codes and our fire codes. The 2024 fire code does call out a lot of standards, a lot of measures that provide for energy storage, best storage systems, but energy storage systems specifically for that very reason. Fire safety things that we could probably insert into supplementary language, but really can be applied as long as they're following that fire code. It does account for that, and it will continue to be updated to ensure safety is improved each time that they update those codes. We will follow that and use that as our measure for some of the more specific elements of development.
I personally had an experience with the city and the fire department on something that was not written in code, but it was restrictive, but it took the public's, safety in mind, and it was a pleasant process to go through, and we did what we needed to do, and we got the box checked. So, it seems that's more appropriate to put that on to the city and the fire. My personal opinion. I'm not trying to sway the other commissioners here, but it seems that purview should fall under the city of Nacogdoches leadership and the fire department to make those determinations at the time of application, because it seems we could probably write a book here, and it may not address every concern until you have that individual applicant come forward with that location, and we just have to trust our leadership to make sure they do the right thing, and obviously they will protect the public.
And we're in a little bit of a catch-22 because the state is supporting these efforts, but they're also providing for some regulatory impact. We can couple that with local regulations that allow us to continue with our planning and what we'd like to see in development in the city. This is a starting point. If we don't define it, we risk putting ourselves in a situation where we may be subject to someone else's decision. So we want to be in control of that.
In this particular case, it would go to Fire Marshal, Mr. Chandler's he would have some blessing over this in any kind of from a fire perspective.
Yes, and he
So
can, you want to speak to that? This would follow site development processes and permitting like any other if it were in place.
Yeah, Jody Chandler, Fire Marshal. Yes, so throughout the whole permit process, anything like that, where they would submit the documentation, the site plans, we would determine if it requires a sprinkler system on it or if it's going to need any other kind of extinguishing agent system. They have clean agent systems, which is like a CO2 fire extinguisher. They have all kinds of them for them. So we actually have to look at that, see if that is what is feasible for that site.
Right.
And then we approve it or deny it and say, no, we need to do this. So yes, it is reviewed by us.
So Mr. Chandler, if you see a location, it's, minimum setback of 50 feet on all sides, but you look at this, say, look, there's a school next door, or this
Exactly.
needs to be 300 feet.
Take
You would make
everything
that
into account.
determination. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's good
It
to
doesn't
know.
address your question, and maybe we can have that, I guess, and so that addresses that. But Mike, from like an eco review from our group, if there's a stream 200 feet behind it, and, all these heavy metals and so forth, I mean, the city can say, put some other kind of, you've got to build a catch or some type of
We'll have to
structural
look at that. Again, we don't want to
overburden.
overburden, but we also don't want to conflict with state regulation, and apply something that has no effect, essentially. Now, I can certainly look into that in preparation for council's consideration and mention that this was brought up by the commissioners. And we can have some elements of that we prepare as part of council's consideration too. But maybe not getting so specific there. There are ways that we can apply some rules that fall within our building code with additional local amendments, or that fall within our site development process with permitting that couples with the SUP. So there's other ways to address potential issues, even from an engineering standpoint. If we're worried about infiltration, that could be something we look at.
Yeah, that answers my,
Okay.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would just point out that if you go back to, can you go back to that slide that shows the, I guess, the additional requirements for these types of systems that we're adding in?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and we're looking at the setbacks. I just wanted to point it out that, all of these say minimum. If we're talking about minimum of lot size, minimum setbacks, those kind of things. So we're talking about an SUP. So as it comes before this body and the council, additional considerations such as, the standing water or something like that, if those factors come out, every application is going to be different. So we have to take those applications as they come and assess that at that time. And if it's determined that there are additional setbacks that need to happen because of that, those can be proposed as part of that application process, as presented to this body and ultimately the council. So just take that into consideration as you're considering this.
All of the components that we've talked about related to this particular use very much match heavy industrial, right? Potential chemical hazards, the use case, the uses for this, it supports the grid at an industrial scale. So it does fit within the category that we've defined as industrial, particularly heavy industrial. So as far as staff is concerned, that for us, that may be straightforward. Industry providers may see that as overly restrictive. The SUP portion of that gives us the ability to apply those supplemental regulations. So those two coupled together, I think, mirror what I know the commission's expressed concerns tonight, similar to what we presented. We've tried to find a land use category that would at least comport in some capacity with our comprehensive and future land use plan. And that's really the core of what we want to establish to help drive some decision-making from applicants in the near future.
Familiar with a lot of this technology, and obviously I'm a proponent for it. Just ensuring that we have, or my concern is obviously making sure there's right systems, processes in place to protect our firefighters and protect our citizens. So, but it's going to be a part of our community. So.
Yep. In terms of noxious gases, do you know how far it can be dispersed? Where it's affecting breathing quality or anything like that if there's an explosion, or try to keep making you come up here?
How far the smoke would go?
Well, inhalation or any type of damages of disbursement of the noxious gases and chemicals.
We haven't been told any certain distance, but I mean, it's just like any other fire that you would have, whether you're burning grass and brush, a structure fire, depending on the wind. On a good calm day, hopefully the smoke would just go straight up. But if it's on a windy day and it's blowing that smoke towards the residents or anybody nearby, I mean, yeah, if you're in the smoke, you can breathe it in.
As far as the things that you brought up, injuries, the inhalation, the heavy metals in your equipment, that's going to fall on the responders mostly, right? We're not talking about like
The inhalation,
blocks outside of that where, other businesses and
it's all dependent on how
the severity of it.
how severe the fire is.
Yeah.
Like I said, if it's just a battery, then yeah, you're probably not talking about a huge amount of smoke. But if the whole system catches on fire, and that, just take we'll just use a shipping container for instance. If that whole shipping container catches on fire and becomes involved, then yeah, you've got 20, 30, 40 batteries that are now burning at a very high rate, severe rate, and it's going to produce a lot of smoke. So it's not only us there on the scene. It's if you put it close to houses and everything, you got to worry about it blowing over and people inhaling it. So it's kind of hard to tell you an exact distance of
Sure.
who would be in danger. It's all going to be based on
And
the
all
severity
that
of the
would
fire.
be considered in each individual application.
Yes.
So from a
Thank
law
you.
enforcement perspective, I mean, there's already hazmat approaches to the,
Yeah.
it'd be scary how much drives up and down the highway and flips over and catches fire and what so that
Exactly
would,
what he's saying. We got the hot zone, which is the immediate area where the fire is. Warm, you're still in a little bit of danger, not as much as in the hot zone. And cold is where we're like, okay, you're safe here. This is where you need to get to.
so those evacuations and so forth would be implemented. Should
Correct.
need be. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
No, I mean, my only comment is that we really consider like he said, can't really do anything. You don't want to hinder it, but at the same time, to ensure that we put in additional words for environmental protections for, our water streams, waste. We're looking at decommissioning, but just in general on waste, like what are we requiring them to do? Can they just store it on their grounds for, however lengthy time that they want to store it for? It's just, those are the questions that I have in my mind.
Specific to an active site, not a
Correct, an
decommissioned
active
site.
site.
Okay.
Right. Environmental concerns are a big thing. And then, of course, like when we're thinking about the fire suppression and what is already standard use for the substations, Encore probably has some type of process and procedure that they are required to follow with these types of energy grids already. So that's something to be looking at, to just see what we can implement in our process and procedures for our firefighters and approval. When we look at the setbacks of 50 feet, now if we are turning over as commissioners and somebody else comes in and they just see this as standard language to accept, they may not change that based upon their knowledge of what we're discussing now. And so I would like to bump that up and not just have 50 feet, because that seems really, really close in proximity to other locations, facilities. And I know it's 1,000 feet away from the residential zoning district that the ESS 1 shall be located, but in setbacks, I don't know. How do you guys feel about that?
Is that enough room for responders?
Well,
Is that enough room for responders? I mean, if it was in the, close proximity to another industrial site?
I think, we've heard the city say it's a minimum, and it will be evaluated on an individual basis with a lot of things taken into consideration,
So, and I'll give you maybe a couple of examples. So if there was a requested site surrounded by residential, clearly that 1,000-foot, it would not clear that 1,000-foot requirement for residential proximity. But if it's only 1 acre, we may need to look at, if we were going to increase that minimum beyond 50-foot setback, we may need to look at maybe increasing the footprint, the minimum footprint to something larger than 1 acre. That could be kind of coupled with if we were to change that in any way. Sure. And again, don't know that we have any use case currently, so there there's no non-conforming case that we know of within the city limits right now. We know of the substations, and we're communicating with Encore on whether or not the language that we're applying here doesn't affect any backup or energy stores that they apply within their substation footprints or other facilities. So that is not the case. Those are of a capacity much smaller than 1 megawatt hour, but certainly something we can entertain or at least get some feedback on from them if that's helpful.
Mike, just, I'm not
Yes.
trying to put you on the spot, but I will.
Okay.
You've presented this, you've heard some feedback from us, and others too. Are you good with the way it's presented? Or do you think there needs to be anything tightened up here, or?
I feel confident in the way it's presented. I think it gives us and the city some flexibility in making decisions, particularly with specific use permitting. And the heavy industrial district categorization does provide some limitations that allow it to mirror other similar uses, although not much similar to battery storage, but something that where we have resources and we have known quantities in industrial sites, if this folds right into something that already exists, we can address it that way. If it's considered in a new location, if someone's requesting a new zoning district, like our public commenter had mentioned, well, then we start that conversation and we look at where our resources can accommodate that in another area. So yes, I'm confident in what we have now, and I have taken down some of the commissioners' concerns. We'll look at what we can present to the council, maybe as an alternative or addition, and let the council at least make a decision on applying one or more of these.
Just for clarity, no matter if it's an industrial district proposed, and that's just for absolute clarity, they still need to have an SUP if they're gonna put a battery storage on an industrial lot. Over this, whatever the definition of this,
So this would be requiring a zoning district of I2, heavy industrial, and a specific use permit.
right, so
Two
if you're,
things,
okay.
two elements.
Perfect.
So every storage station like this would get a specific use permit.
Correct.
Okay.
If this were applied. Now, Encore substations, they can acquire a specific use permit in other zoning district areas. That's different than this.
Yep. Any other questions? I make a recommendation to approve as presented here.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is that you, is that everyone? Okay. All opposed, say same. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else you want?
No, just that with the recommendations that we have.
The concerns that
You're
commission
gonna-
has
you're gonna
expressed,
take-
we'll make sure and
Absolutely.
communicate that with the council.
Absolutely. Before we close out here, on a future agenda, I just want to make sure on the special use permit on Douglas, we approved that as you presented it. Did we need to read that out specifically?
You can add any additional,
Any other restrictions to it? Or- Okay,
it's secondary to restaurant use.
just want to make sure we're good there. Okay. Ay, ay, ay. Moving on to 6, future agenda items. Commissioner may inquire about a subject for which notice has not been given. A statement of specific factual information or the recitation of existing policy may be given. Any deliberation shall be limited to a proposal to place subject on agenda for subsequent meeting. Do we have anything else that we would like to put on for future meeting? Thank you, everyone that was here and participated, and thank you to my fellow commissioners. We'll adjourn.